From the moment of birth, we're already deceased. Time is an illusion. But what does this have to do with Frankenstein? Well, everything. Where do we come from? Where do we go from here? It depends on the version you've read or watched, but we'll stick to the classic tale. And what were the creature's real first words? It reads, "I accepted this reception. All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, that creature, to whom thou art bound by ties and only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death, until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends." He understands that sentience is a curse, and he never consented to life. In his mind, one who wakes up is worse than existing as 1,000 unthinking beings. He intuits almost everything right. Almost. Let me elucidate how the creature misses the most important point. The monster thinks that there's some sort of contract in play, or at least he hopes for it. But there is no contract. There's no ultimate responsibility. Just an accident. He thinks he can make a demand to the universe. Really, he's acting as the universe's own realization. He seeks blame, and surely his creator is responsible. But what he doesn't realize is there's nothing to reconcile anyway. Here's where I tie my own belief. First of all, this is going to touch on the theme of God. Even though I'm an atheist, what I call God is just everything, not something anthropomorphic. The reason I bring this up is because I want to clarify that it doesn't really matter if you're theistic or not. It's just philosophical. You'll notice I talk about God a lot in my videos, even though I'm a non-believer. That's simply because it's impossible to talk about anything without scaling back all the way to God. I'm always comparing the smallest details with the big picture. So, Frankenstein's monster is a necessarily broken creature. He cannot fully comprehend his maker, and his maker, his God, is a totally static being, and creation is just a shard in the vastness. We're like a stitched-up creature trying to make sense of why we bleed, and God discovers that he cannot complete himself, and instead of resolving his internal conflicts, he creates partial representations to cope with a mistake: chemistry, biology, consciousness, and stories. It's a misunderstanding that we're his children. We're more like his feedback loop. We are God failing to return to himself repeatedly. And when he can't return, he exists as Frankenstein, his creature, suddenly there and suddenly not. We long for unity because there really is no I in the absolute sense. So interestingly, God is not dead. We feel something cold, but we didn't check for his heartbeat or an autopsy report. The truth is, instead, that we're dealing with a trembling, traumatized entity. The nihilist might say that nothing matters. But what if it was more disturbing? What if everything mattered too much to be together and we're unable to look in the mirror? So we proliferate. We create eyes and ears and bones and consciousness. But does Frankenstein want to kill his creator, the monster? No, not really, not at first. Again, he specifically threatened his friends, if you read the text, his loved ones. He won't end his creator because he simply can't, not yet. The monster is, in some sense, the creator. The monster wants to complete him. It's definitely horrifying, but there's also a twisted beauty to it. Absurdity and comedy as well. It's the ultimate joke the universe keeps telling itself because it has no mouth left to laugh with. Let's deviate from Frankenstein for a minute and I'll wrap it back up later. But let's stay on the subject of film. There were 2 movies I watched as a kid that really embedded themselves into my psyche. One was The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. That one was pretty cool. And the other was Jacob's Ladder. I realize now that there was a divine truth to these movies hidden right there in plain sight. Well, mostly the latter one. I mean, sure, existence is kind of buggy and gross, but, well, you know. Now, Jacob's Ladder, just a warning, I'm going to give spoilers here, so if you haven't seen the movie, pause the video and go watch it, and press the play button right about now. Okay, I'll summarize the themes of the movie. We think Jacob returns from Vietnam and experiences horrible flashbacks, and we can only wonder what's really going on. But what's truly horrifying is that nothing is actually wrong. It's just that his soul cannot identify the truth. The demons in the movie are really just therapists with, bad bedside manners, more or less. We think of hell as punishment in this case, but that's not true. Hell is resistance. So the movie is just a movie, I understand. In reality, God as the everything cannot let go. Unlike Jacob's son who reassures his father that everything is okay and it's time to move on, God cannot do this. He cannot access a higher self. He can only diminish and fragment himself into everything else, into states of flux, into motion and being, and into partial eyesight, that would be us. God cannot complete. Unity is eternally broken. This is why we yearn for love and belonging and meaning, because to describe something means we're already at its distance. It means we cannot ever truly reach it. If we try anyway and fail, this is beautiful, at least the aspect of it. However, we must also realize that God must also reach and yearn for something greater, if he's in the eternal act of dying. Because if he rules heaven or the afterlife, he cannot ascend whatsoever. He can only descend, blindly so, lest he be damned. Humanity is the self-aware, ungoverned eye that begins to take in every accessible facet of reality, which is interesting because Jacob was dying in Vietnam and slowly succumbing. The movie itself is the result of his experience through his pineal gland, or what some call the third eye. Not to get mystical, but Jacob feels the weight of eternity fading when really, only about a minute or less passes during this hallucination. In comparison to God, we exist in just the blink of an eye. Reality is a transition, a prolonged seizure between incompatible states. Consciousness is the mid-extraction. We think we live forward, but in truth, we're dying backwards. Trauma is the process of decay. Now, you're probably wondering why God, or the everything, would do this. Well, if existence is just a natural process because reality is a paradox in eternal motion, then the idea of the twitching corpse isn't a why. But whether or not we describe reality as an all-powerful deity or just a raw mechanism, the how to this false closure should remain the same. Beauty or grace or love can't save us. It won't bring us into salvation. Rather, God, or again the everything, requires a fracture to feel difference. The universe created self-awareness, and whether or not that was purposeful doesn't really matter now. Here we are. It needs us to be beautiful to one another, regardless of our differences. And if it doesn't require us to do just that, it still follows we should do it anyway, as we require to our current selves. We're like the eye of God bearing witness to the process of death. But why death? Again, what is God in this context? He is omniscient, omnipotent, timeless, spaceless. He knows love and hate, fear and courage, here and there, in and out. He embodies every paradox with simultaneity. And if time is an illusion, we're dying backwards, and we're moving towards a final rest, a final peace, aren't we? Isn't existence just an exequy? If God as a fragmented, twitching, not-so-dead corpse were to ever fully wake up, it would look like eternal boredom. Yes, boredom. God cannot remain fully conscious of his existence, or else he faces a landscape of nothing to do. He, she, or it is everything. Agony is better than nothingness in the case of God. Even beliefs like hell, or a demiurge, or something like dark enlightenment, they're all paradoxically favorable to a being of absolute power. Why? Because at least pain feels like something. Suffering is proof that there's at least some kind of difference. In the case of boredom, the infinity of the perfect sameness wouldn't even hurt, but that also means absolutely nothing is happening. To feel both everything and nothing across all possible time and spatial dimensions is far worse for him. It's impossible. So, he breaks. He breaks and he breaks, never quite fully resolving himself, twitching and twitching like a paradoxical paroxysm. And yeah, I love alliteration if you couldn't tell. Still, is this a tragedy? Maybe. But it's a stalling mechanism. The everything needs to wait. It needs to hold its breath forever because it's impossible for its lung to collapse. Again, God isn't quite dead, nor did he choose this. There wasn't a choice, just an impossibility of remaining unified. Assuming God, there's no friction, there's no distance, no difference, no delay. Most importantly, there's no contradiction. This boredom is a kind of suffocation. So creation, whether divine or natural, has nothing to do with curiosity or love. It's just the failure to endure boredom. A perfect hell would have too many differences, so we settle for something in the middle, sort of a lesser hell. Well, at least we got tacos down here. and otters. A world without otters, guys, would knock us down a peg at least. Anyway, here, something is happening. Something will always be happening. We're the glitch in God's little plan. Frankenstein's monster is the eye of God. He is us, abruptly awakened. He looks around, blinks, and wonders what the hell is going on. Frankenstein is consciousness without a future, without redemption. He's keen enough to know he's inside a process that doesn't need awareness to continue. He's only a bug, a hiccup in the machine. And then the machine corrects itself, and the eye closes. God is the entire system that accidentally noticed itself, recoiled in horror, and then tries shutting its eyes again. The universe resumes its process, and perhaps another defect will find its way in eventually. I mean, it did once, it could do so again. Furthermore, it's interesting to take note that if God is a twitching corpse, then Frankenstein's creature also embodies this. As a terribly unattractive being, it's as if his birth is death on arrival. It's as if his life is already over, it's predetermined, and his options have been cut off, and the only thing that awaits is death. The only real philosophical question he must ask himself is the question of self-annihilation. And this isn't just philosophical. Millions of people are born into undesirable lives. In order for someone to be considered attractive, someone else must be considered unattractive, or at least less attractive. And how should they live? And why? For what purpose? Attraction aside, it's the only real philosophical question we must all face eventually. And what do I say? I say no. God has the privilege of faking death and resting. Consciousness itself must stay wide awake to do the noticing for him. We don't have the privilege of self-annihilation. Consciousness just plays hot potato from one creature to the next. Paradoxically, I did mention that we are already dead. Noticing this part is how we live. We can't avoid death. We can choose how we live. People aren't gods, and monsters aren't gods. Only God has the privilege of the process of endless obliteration. Consciousness must bear the weight of a broken, finite nature. If we're dying anyway, well, what must we do while we're still alive? Well, maybe the universe doesn't need us to answer everything. Perhaps the questioning itself is the purpose. And what happens when we lose interest in the questions? With that said, Frankenstein, among a myriad of other stories, is more than the end of the road. It's the beginning and the middle. It's everything meaningful. In the classic novel, the creature vows to burn himself in the frozen wastes of the Arctic. But does he? His fate is ultimately ambiguous. Maybe that's the real message. The bitter truth is cold, but maybe while we are here, looking around, we'll realize there's a fragment of the everything that we'll never fully understand ourselves. Or perhaps we're more like God's broken heart, but who knows? So, do we embrace self-immolation? Or do we look for other versions of Frankenstein, his monster, the ones that have made peace during existence? I think I'll close with the final speech of the creature in the Frankenstein novel, which reflects both the creator and the creation. But soon I shall die, and what I feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly, and exult in the agony of torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace, or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell.